Chapter 9. Jess stared into the sea of black that was her closet as Emily dressed the next morning. "What's the matter?" Emily's voice carried over from her side of the room. "I have nothing to wear. Everything I own is black or holy or," Jess shrugged, "not what you wear to church." She didn't know much, but she didn't think miniskirts and crop tops seemed appropriate for church. Tears pricked at the back of her eyes, and she blinked furiously to keep them at bay. A small, knowing smile spread on Emily's face, and her eyes lit up. She held up a finger, then turned to her closet. After flicking hangers back and forth, she pulled out a blue dress and held it out to Jess. "God doesn't care what you wear, but it is important to feel comfortable. It's not your usual style, but the blue would look great with your eyes, and I think we're close enough in size." The tears forced their way to the front and blurred Jess's vision. She couldn't remember the last time someone had told her she looked nice when they weren't trying to get her into bed. "Thanks." As she grabbed the dress, Jess turned her head to wipe the tears away before Emily saw. On one hand, it was just a solid blue piece of fabric, but on the other, it was a symbol for so much more. After slipping on the soft cotton dress, Jess looked in the mirror, stunned at the transformation. The blue did bring out her ocean eyes. Her skin looked pale but smooth, and even her hair appeared less severe. "See?" Emily asked, coming up behind her. "Beautiful." Jess nodded, still stunned at how different she looked. "Oh, they're here," Emily said as her cell phone beeped. "They?" "Yeah, Chase and Sarah. Jared needed to go in early today, so Chase and Sarah offered to go with us. Don't worry, they're nice. They're both members of the Students for Life group I'm in." Her eyes dropped back to her phone as she typed back a message. Jess's nerves crumpled in on each other, and a small voice whispered in her head. Sure, Emily accepted her, but would her friends? She wasn't even sure about this church thing, and now she had the added pressure of meeting new people at the same time. Was she doing the right thing? "Maybe I should stay home," Jess said, and the voice agreed. I don't even have a Bible." "Don't worry," Emily said, holding out hers. "You can borrow mine. I have it on my phone, too." The small voice rebutted. It wasn't hers. People would know. She could never really fit in. Jess shook her head to stop the negative thoughts and grabbed the Bible. Though it didn't ease all her worries, it seemed to silence the voice. For now, at least. She ran her free hand down the borrowed dress, though no wrinkle was in sight, nodded, and followed Emily out of the room. A tall guy with sandy blonde hair and an almost equally tall girl with short, spiky blonde hair were waiting for them at the bottom of the stairs. "Chase, Sarah, I'd like you to meet my roommate, Jess," Emily said. "What's up, Jess?" Chase said with an easy grin. "So nice to meet you, Jess," Sarah said. Her gray eyes sparkled as she shook Jess's hand. They were the most interesting color she'd ever seen, like the color of fog in the evening. Though her features were sharp, her voice was soft and friendly, and she emitted a calming presence. "Nice to meet you too," Jess said, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. Fears kept popping up in her mind. What if the others weren't like Emily and Jared? What if they mocked her for coming? Did she really want to give up a Sunday for this? What if she hated it? Even as they walked to the parking lot, the questions cycled in Jess's head. Sarah claimed the front seat next to Chase, easing some of her nervousness. Sarah seemed nice, but not knowing her, Jess didn't want to answer a lot of questions or attempt small talk. She swallowed to ease the knots as she climbed in the back seat next to Emily, but they remained resolute. A few minutes later, they pulled into the church parking lot, and Jess's eyes widened. A large white building loomed in front of them, and the parking lot teemed with cars. There's so many. She thought she had only spoken in her head until Emily touched her arm. "It'll be all right. We're all right here with you, and it probably won't seem like so many inside." Nodding, Jess opened the car door. Other college-age students meandered in the parking lot. "Is this a university-only church?" "No," Chase laughed. "But they have a great program for high school and college-age students, so a lot come here." Several young adults stood at the entrance to the church, handing out brochures of some kind. Curious, Jess took one, and the group entered the large open room. Rows of chairs filled it, and a large raised platform occupied most of the front. A piano, drum set, and several guitars sat atop the platform. 3 large white screens hung at the front of the room as well. one in the middle, and one on each side. Chase chose a row in the middle aisle, and they filed in. Sarah took Chase's left side, Emily his right, and Jess sat on Emily's right, closest to the aisle. As the others chatted quietly, she opened the thin brochure. A listing of activities filled the left side. Groups for men, for women, for teens. It carried into the middle partition. She couldn't believe how many options were offered. Jess had thought church was just a Sunday thing, but there was something happening nearly every day of the week. A men's and women's ministry on Monday, choir on Tuesday, drama ministry on Wednesday, teen college ministry on Thursday, and movie night on Friday. The only day where nothing was listed was Saturday. On the far right panel, a section for prayer requests filled the top, and the bottom held a Staying Connected card that you could fill out to give them your information. As people filled in around them, the hum of conversation grew louder. Jess looked up from the brochure, expecting to see a sea of dresses and suits, but men and women alike sported pants, some even jeans. Maybe Emily had been right about God not caring what people wore. A few minutes later, several people took the stage. A woman sat down at the piano, a man at the drum set, 2 men grabbed guitars, and 4 other men and women picked up microphones. Jess hadn't noticed before. The music filled the auditorium, and while the music was not what Jess usually listened to, she enjoyed the sound. She knew none of the words, but her foot tapped along to the rhythm. When the music ended, the pastor took the stage. As he spoke about Satan using insecurities to pull people away from God, his words hit Jess's heart, and she remembered the voice from earlier trying to convince her not to come. Had that been Satan? She glanced around to see if others were affected. Is he speaking just to me? The more he spoke, the more it felt like his words were for her alone, and emotion began bubbling up inside. She wiped her eyes, pretending an eyelash or something was in them, and hoping no one else would notice. When the service ended, people began filing out. Jess followed, but the pastor's words tumbled around in her head. Could it be that she sought male companionship because she was so insecure? Was that Satan attacking her? Even as the group went to lunch, Jess continued to process the words of the preacher. As Chad sat between his parents and his younger sister in church, a feeling of unease crept in. He felt like a fraud, not having been inside a church in over a year, but his sister had begged him to stay the night when he'd showed up at the house yesterday. When he'd agreed, only due to his guilt over not seeing her as often as he should, his mother had suggested he attend church with him the next morning. Chad had initially declined, stating his lack of attire as a reason. He hadn't planned on spending the night and therefore hadn't brought a change of clothes with him. But his mother had insisted. Now, as he listened to the pastor's words, he thought back to Kyle's journal. He had read it cover to cover the previous night after dinner. Kyle had been so strong in his faith, and Chad wondered if he had ever been as strong, or if he had merely been putting on the show. He certainly couldn't remember thinking the way Kyle had, putting others above himself. Chad had always thought about himself first. Why would God take Kyle, who would have been a much better example for others to follow? You can always come back to God, the pastor said, his words breaking through Chad's sidetracked thoughts. He is always waiting for you with open arms. No matter what you've done, God will forgive you if you just ask. Let us pray. Chad watched as heads around him bowed, but he couldn't follow suit. Not yet. Though he felt something, he wasn't ready to give up his anger yet. God had taken his brother, and he needed to know why.